Blythe, an 8-eyed doll deemed too creepy for child's play, but with an endearing quality and photogenic flair that would eventually earn her a cult following. Made in the 70s in America, revived in the 2000s in Japan, and having her moment again in the 2020s. Blythe's popularity has risen in ways since her conception, and perhaps the biggest of those ways is happening right now. These things are everywhere online at the moment, for me at least, and their prevalence has been rapidly increasing over the past year. There's the physical trends of owning a Blythe, making a mini-me, collecting Blythe. Then there are the slightly more controversial, though definitely more accessible and widespread trends of just finding a Blythe that looks like you online, or just grabbing images of one-of-a-kind dolls in general and captioning them with, "This is so me if you even care." These posts have no intention to cause harm, but there is definitely a controversy because both Blythe photography and the designing and creating of those custom dolls are art forms. The customizers and the photographers are going uncredited in the process. I don't think I've been aware of the doll customization community long enough to comment any further on those trends. I don't think it takes much more context than that to understand that perspective on it though. One way that people are giving credit now is by AI generating images of Blythe dolls, which is still stealing, just not as retraceable. So that's interesting. Anyways, I have never been relaxed about anything ever. That's what it says in the script. I get myself deep into situations of being very intense about things overnight, and Blythe became one of them. I saw a video by Strawberry Sprite on Blythe dolls. I'd seen a few Blythe dolls in TikToks before, and it just kind of accumulated very quickly. At some point since first seeing one of these dolls, I had suddenly decided that I did not just want to look them up, look at memes of them, think about decorating one. I wanted to get one and to customize it myself. I jumped straight to looking at Blythe dolls to buy online, and in my case, I definitely wanted a mini me, so I wanted to make a Blythe doll look like myself. If you're brand new to this, the first thing you might want to understand is the difference between like what is and isn't a Blythe doll. Real Blythes fall under two categories: vintage releases from 1972 under the original creation company Kenner, before the company was acquired by Hasbro, and Neo Blythes from 2001 onwards, produced in Japan under CWC Tokyo under a license provided by Hasbro. These girls come boxed and clothed and named, and it's quite clear that they are a Blythe. The limbs are straight, they are branded. There aren't that many releases, so it's not hard to identify them. These are all Blythe in the same way that a Barbie is a Barbie. It's just, regardless of the era or the range or the release, these are all Blythe dolls. People do customize these dolls, and the trend of customization started with these official dolls, but the chances are many of the pictures you have seen of mini-me's and face-ups online that you believe to be Blythe were actually not. They were Blythe. It's a name used to refer to any doll drawing heavily, for lack of a better word, on the original Blythe doll. This is an average Blythe. She has the iconic 4 sets of eyes and a drawstring to change them, but is overall more practical to customize. Her hair is long, strong, and adaptable, and available in unlimited colors. She usually has a BJD, or ball jointed doll body, minimal detail in her face, and comes in a range of skin tones, often with extra hands for posing. To clarify, there is not like a Blythe shop or site. There is no right or wrong when it comes to Blythe dolls because they're not all from one company or distributor. They are just everywhere. That being said, these dolls are often referred to as factory dolls based on the idea that they are made up of real Blythe parts from the Blythe factories. Whilst this may have been a true way of sourcing these heads at some point, it's pretty easy to assume that these dolls are just being made from scratch somewhere now. The good news is the majority of people in the doll customization community have absolutely nothing against the existence of these dolls, of buying them or customizing them. You don't have to own a real Blythe to enjoy her as a concept. People are on the whole happy to call anything that tries to be Blythe, Blythe. The only real reason to know this difference is so that you as a consumer don't make any mistakes and don't get confused about the value of what it is you're buying. If you just wanted to get into collecting these dolls, then both a Neo Blythe from Japan and a customized Blythe from an experienced customizer could be in the hundreds of pounds and dollars. So you really just want to understand what it is that's special about what you're buying to make it cost that much, to give it that value. But if you're like me and you just want to try customizing a Blythe-like doll for yourself, then you should be able to find a Blythe somewhere in the £40 to £70 bracket, so like $50 to $100, I guess. I actually managed to cut a financial corner right at the start, as I managed to find the exact doll I wanted online secondhand. I negotiated a little and also threw in a pair of shoes, as that was one thing I was confident I could not make myself, and my total cost including packaging came to £36, which is not a bad place to start. at all. As you can kind of see, I did immediately play around with her appearance a little bit just to get familiar with her. She was rocking about 14 inches of hair when I first got her, and that was just a bit much for me. The ends were not in great condition, so I did give her a haircut, and I got like a head to hair length ratio that was much closer to mine. I gave her some tiny eyebrows just with a makeup pencil, just to like figure out what she would look like with eyebrows. I also whipped up this shirt dress out of scrap jersey to keep her covered for now because she was without clothes. At this point, I was already obsessed with her. I would honestly recommend anyone that has ever thought about getting a Blythe or a Blythe, just do it. Even this level of customization of just playing around with her a bit made it worth it for me. I have discovered in doing this that the Blythe community is very connected and very knowledgeable. There are so many detailed tutorials for each stage of this process already online, performed by professional customizers. So this video isn't going to be so much of a tutorial as a follow along as I experience the ups and downs and hidden costs myself. Hopefully what you'll get out of it is my first-hand account of what goes wrong, what goes right, what was unexpected, and what corners can and really can't be cut for a beginner or one-time customizer. If you are planning to watch this in one sitting or have it on as background noise, then get settled and get what you need because this is going to be quite a long chill video. Before we really get going, I do just want to reinstate that the extent of customization I do in this video is very minor but also not reversible, and this is going to be overall a little taxing on like her screws, her screw holes, her fastenings. There are some big like don'ts when it comes to customizing a Blythe doll, and the three I'm glad to have encountered before starting are: don't use acetone or nail varnish remover on her face, watch out for the spring when you first open her, and do not make a habit of constantly opening your doll up or taking her apart. It is pretty hard to ruin a doll, but it's definitely doable by a simple misunderstanding, but even then there is always an answer. Replacement parts for practically every aspect of the doll are available online. As long as you do your research first and actually listen to all the advice you find, then you should be like absolutely fine. I would never want to discourage someone from doing this. It is totally doable, but there was the odd moment where I was like about to do something and thought I would just like run it by the doll customization subreddit first and immediately found out that was an awful idea. So just don't be afraid to ask. Once everything I needed had arrived, it was time to strip her back to the basics, because the first thing to do when customizing a Blythe doll is take her apart. I was following a number of tutorials here and I will link them below. Many of them I saw said to just go right in and cut her string, but I actually chose to just untie the ring from the end in case I did end up keeping it. I will explain more once we're inside her head, which you do by pressing hard against the sides to pop her open, and oh my goodness, the pillow trick like does work, but it's so hard, and it took me like 4 attempts to find the right pillow. Now, this is where you need to be really careful if you're undecided as to whether or not you're going to give your doll sleepy eyes. Sleepy eyes is achieved by putting her back together slightly differently, so she has 2 strings, one of them to change her eyes and close them, and one of them to open them up again. If you know you're going to make this alteration, then you do not need to be precious with the string or the spring, because you'll need to source more string anyway to make the second one, and the spring has no purpose now. If you don't plan to do sleepy eyes or you're just undecided, you might as well keep her string unless you've already got one lined up to change it to. But what's most important is that you don't warp this spring, because this spring is what closes and opens the eyes in one movement. I am undecided at this point in the process, so I am just preserving everything as I go, and I fiddled around with some pliers to gently bend the loop at the end of the spring and free it from the back of her head plate. What comes next is just a lot of unscrewing and popping out of place of parts. The only other super important aspect of the head to know about is the T-bar. The T-bar is what stops the eye at each eye as it spins. I would say to find like an old tin or little box to just keep all your screws, the T-bar, the ring pull, and the string in for now, because you really don't want to lose them at any point in this process. The next stage, now she is deconstructed, is to prepare her front and back faceplates and her eyelids for a face-up. But I did have a personal detour to take. I personally was having a couple of issues with my doll's hair as it was. The first being that it was a little springier and curlier than I wanted. The second being that it was holding a lot of... This is so bad. It was holding scent, and I wasn't bad, it just like wasn't my house. I just figured whilst her hair was off would be the best time to try out a boil wash, because you really don't want to get water inside these dolls' heads. I do want to clear up as well, I discovered that a hair spa for a real Blythe and a boil wash for just any other nylon based doll hair are very separate beasts. I cannot comment on what a Blythe hair spa is at all I can say is that if your Blythe is having any sort of hair problems, the answer is probably just chuck it in some boiling water and see what happens, because it's not going to get damaged and it may well fix it. Boil wash is pretty self-explanatory. I just poked it around in there for a good while and left it soaking, then laid it out flat on a towel. You can also buy scalps on their own if you just want to change a doll's hair, or you can buy or make wigs so you can change them more frequently, which is fun. Honestly, from where I stand now with the doll done, both the defrizzing and the descenting were about 70% effective. If I was super hung up on it, I might try a second boil wash, but I was happy with where I got to for now. This step might not be relevant for a lot of people, so let's move on to the actual face up. The two things you may not be anticipating that you do need to know before doing a face up are that you will need to sand her face and you will need to find some Mr. Super Clear. My god, I'll explain him later. The reason we need to sand her face is to remove her current makeup, get a matte surface if that's desirable, and to get some grip on the surface so that we can apply our own makeup. According to the Blythe wiki, one would ideally use 400 to 3000 grit, starting with 400 and working up to 3000, which would be the finest. I was working only to please myself and meet my own budget, and I bought this bag of sponges that were approximately 800 to 1000. It was like fine, it was satisfactory. I just wanted her matte and ready for application, and some customizers do argue that 1000 does the job. I did also experiment a tiny bit with carving. I think I was being a bit ambitious for my first time. I did buff down her nose using the sanding sponge to make it a bit less pointy, which is a pretty common customization, and that went absolutely fine. But I did then go in with a craft knife, which I probably shouldn't have, but I felt pretty out of my depth and I called it pretty quick. I have seen some experienced customizers chisel away at these areas and drill real nostrils in, all using very specialized tools, but when it actually came to it, I was quite happy to sand out what little carving I had attempted and just focus on like the main aspects of the face up. What we're actually aiming for here is to get rid of all the shine, ideally everywhere to get it even, but especially in the areas you intend to apply something later. I instinctively was sanding in a little circular motion. The good thing about using sponges as opposed to paper is getting really controlled and precise pressure in the nooks and crannies. It is possible to cause scratches or even to sand too deep, but both are very unlikely as long as you're using a relatively fine grit. If you are including your eyelids, then you'll want to protect your doll's lashes. I've covered mine with washi tape, and once all your pieces are done, wash them off in a sink of warm soapy water and dry them with something that won't leave fibers, such as paper towel. You'll want them completely free of dust and grease and completely dry for the next step. Now, Mr. Super Clear. I know that man. This is what seals things. It prepares sanded plastic for application and it seals your artwork at the end. This stuff is fabled amongst Blythe customizers and it feels incredibly daunting, but that is for somewhat of a good reason. Not because it's hard to use necessarily, but because it can be quite hard to find, but above all else, it can be really bad for your health and it's really bad to inhale. There is no way around it. You do need to be doing this outside or out an open window if that's your best bet, and you do need to be wearing a ventilator mask like this at least. Even a full face mask would not be like overly precautious. The key word to look for in a mask is one that protects against organic vapors, and when worn correctly, you should not be able to smell anything with the mask on. Obviously, as we're protecting ourselves this much, you also need to be far, far away from all other humans and animals whilst using Mr. Super Clear. I spent £40 on this part of the customization, which is more than the doll herself. This mask was £24 and the Mr. Super Clear was £16 at the time of purchasing. For that reason, this was a step I was really tempted to skimp out on. I was just trying to find any way around it, but there just isn't one, and this is like the part you want to do right. And once you've invested in it, once you've customized your first doll, you already have that stuff to customize another. You could lend it to friends if they were getting into the craft as well. It is worth it, but this is what makes doll customization such an expensive and therefore kind of inaccessible and exclusive feeling hobby. It is that down payment, but I don't want that to discourage people from like taking the leap and doing it. I did not actually film any of this part. I was just focusing really hard on doing it right, but I will give you some explanation of what it was I was doing. The things I took outside were a sheet of cardboard, a cardboard box, the ventilator mask, a disposable glove, which in my case came with the mask, a strong perfume, Mr. Super Clear, and the freshly sanded doll parts. I'd put the mask on and spray the perfume to check that I couldn't smell anything, and I would recommend doing this because the first couple times I could, and I was like, this isn't gonna work. but I did eventually. Then I would either place the doll part down on the cardboard sheet or hold it in the gloved hand just above it. With my other hand, I would have Mr. Superclear. I would make sure my back was to the breeze, if there was any, shake it, spray it at about a foot distance whilst constantly keeping the stream of product moving across the surface. Then I would just put everything down and walk about 5 meters away and stay there for a good minute. I know this sounds crazy, but the risks associated with breathing this thing in are so high and accumulate with use. Some would say this is overly precautious, others would say this is not cautious enough. If I was ever to do this for a living, I would genuinely invest in a full face hood, but that is not the case right now. I could one time smell the chemicals straight after spraying. I don't know what happened. I don't know what changed from when I originally put the mask on, but I just put everything down immediately and ran away for a good couple of minutes that time. After I felt each doll part was done, I then put them all inside the cardboard box to keep dust and dirt away and set a timer for 15 minutes to let the sealant set. I then repeated the whole process again, so each part would have 2 layers on in total, and then I took the parts inside, and then this time when the time was up, they would be ready to draw on. I do consider myself a self-proclaimed illustrator artist for all intents and purposes. I do just draw a lot. This did mean that I was very confident going in for the face, and I knew what medium I wanted to use, and I knew that I would be happy with how it looked. Most likely. Pencil is my preferred medium, and the idea of her looking like a drawing come to life, to me that was almost a meta way to link her appearance to my personality. But if you do not have any art supplies yet, or you want your doll to look smoother than this, you probably want to do your own research and invest in some powder pastels, or at the very least watercolor pencils and some soft brushes, and you'll get an effect more like this. So I pretty much just started to draw my own face of makeup onto her face. In this footage right at the start of the process, I am testing out some old watercolor pencils. They are softer, I guess, but I just wasn't getting along with them compared to what I'm used to using. And you can see once I start using just standard colored pencils, despite them being like the same price bracket, I just get on with it much quicker, much easier, but that might just be like my own skills and downfalls coming through. Also, drawing the eyebrows was the most fun part. Like the contrast between her eyebrows versus when she didn't have any is like a different being. I am giving her a bat wing because I have hooded eyes and I tend to do them on myself. It was at this point that I realized I'd been working really hard to detail an area that would not be seen, which is cool. If you're also doing a bat wing or like a design on the eyelids, you might just want to kind of hold them where they will sit in her faceplate and mark for yourself like an outline of what is actually visible. Remember, they do shut really tight when the eyes are changing though, so it is always better to color the whole eye plate, or at least beyond what can be seen, just in case. I was getting some fallout and I did accidentally pick up product with my fingers whilst doing this. I found that a putty eraser worked pretty well to get rid of the smudges, but I did have to lightly sand the odd bit that had become truly stained. This is not ideal, but there are so many layers of Mr. Superclear to come that I was assured by other customizers' advice online that this would be absolutely fine. It is also really common to sign the back plate of your doll, whatever that means to you. I am historically quite obsessed with putting butterflies or Lorenzo tractors on things. I think I'm just mildly taunted by the passage of time always. So I did a nice little butterfly and made myself a stencil. If you're doing anything symmetrical like a heart, I guess you could also do a little stencil. At this point I had just done the eyes, the ears, the eyelids and the butterfly on the back. I did do one coat of Mr. Superclear at this point, so back outside doing the whole process again. Just one coat to seal what I had so far and to stop the product spreading via my fingers. I then did the cheeks, some blush shaping and shading, the lips, and some extra detail and corrections all over. I spent a really long time on the lips and actually got some really cool outcomes like along the way, but just would change my mind. These ones were my favorite in like an isolated sense, but I just felt like she looked way too glam for a mini-me doll and was like losing her Blythe gentleness. So I did rub them back and keep them a bit more neutral on the whole so that her eyes could still be like the main feature. Once happy with everything, I did the whole Mr. Superclear process again, this time doing 2 coats to seal everything. So I did 5 coats in total. Like a lot of the steps, this is arguably below what a professional customizer would do, but should suffice for a personal doll. This was a much harder task than I expected, because the tutorials I found made it look so easy, and it was not. The trick to get these eye chips out, which does work, I promise, is to melt the end of a glue gun stick, squidge it against the eye, let it cool, and then yank it out with a bit of a twist. You will also need either a lighter or something to light a candle. You just need a small controlled flame so you can keep going back to melt the end of the sticks with it. Unfortunately for me, the blue Blythe eyes are notoriously the most difficult to remove, and that is the only color of her existing eye set I knew I did not want. My first few attempts, even with leaving the sticks on for 10 plus minutes, just did not work. After much trial and error, I basically had to combine every method that I had heard of. I soaked the whole set of eyes in warm soapy water for a really long time. I actually don't remember how long, but it was probably over an hour. Then I stuck a glue stick on each, or rather I chopped one in half so I could do it that way, and I put them in the fridge to cool. Literally went out and had the rest of my day. When I got home, I took them out and I just gave it a go, and it just worked right away. But it was still pretty stiff, and I don't think I could have done it without doing all of those steps, unfortunately. So maybe get started on your eyes like right away. I don't know. The brown ones still took a couple of attempts with the glue stick method, but were on the whole so much easier. The only thing I didn't do was try dislodging them with a sewing needle. I started to try, but just didn't feel I could do it without damaging the whites of the eyes. I would say that method is much more of a last resort, not an alternative to going and buying glue sticks in the first place. I got these custom eye chips from eBay, and I played around painting on the back of them with nail varnish, with seeing what paper looked like through them. I should let you know that clear nail varnishes are known to yellow over time. I happen to have used this glitter like clear nail varnish for other things before, and it just hasn't shown any signs of yellowing, so I'm okay with using it. I tried a few different designs, but ended up choosing these black ones with sparkles on that I'd made, and plain white ones that I'd made just sticking the back of a label to the eye chip and trimming it, which seemed to work okay. I did commit a slight crime whilst putting these in, because they're just held in with blue tack. Sorry. It is not recommended to use anything close to like hot glue or super glue when putting the eye chips back in, because it's just not necessary at all. They should hold pretty well on their own, but epoxy putty is the best thing, and then PVA or Elmer's would be the next best thing to just give them a little something to hold on to. When it did come time to put her back together, I had already started to entertain the idea of sleepy eyes now, but only if I could find something to use for the second cord. I did get a bit overexcited off camera and just start searching through all of my craft junk. Finding these two chains of the same length, these two cohesive charms, the rings and the stars, in amongst all of that just happened so quick, and I was a little too excited to see it finished and did not film any of putting it together, unfortunately. But I guess this part of the process isn't really imitable. It's not about you going and finding exactly what I found. It's more about you going and buying or finding something in your home that you want to add to your own Blythe doll. I did also give her some earrings, and then realized afterwards that I probably could have done it another way, so I'll just try and explain what I mean. I had some beads from Captive Bead Rings, if you know what they are. I no longer have the rings, so they're kind of redundant, so I just super glued them onto where her little earrings holes are. But I realized afterwards, while her head is open, you could probably put actual earrings on her. But on the whole, I'm still pretty happy with that outcome. I feel like it makes it look like me. Because I am working with chain now, the putting back together process is going to be slightly different than the average one, but I should still hopefully be able to convey how easy Sleepy Eyes is to do, because I didn't realize how easy it was before I did it myself. Also, if you have already put charms on the end like I had, you will need to feed your strings through the back plate before you do any of this. This is a slightly awkward way to work, and that one is entirely on me. I probably should have thought about that first. We're going to be putting one string back where we took the string from, and we're going to be putting the other string where we took the spring from. The way that I attached my chain was I cut off sections of her original string, threaded them how every actual tutorial shows and describes nylon being rethreaded, but then tied the chain in and cut the string short. So it's just about an inch of string total. And then there's the knot on one side, keeping it in place inside the doll, and the other knot is just attaching the chain. If you are using nylon thread in any way here, you can use a lighter to seal your knots. As nylon is plastic, this will just lightly melt and therefore fuse your knots together a bit. Obviously, do this very carefully. Other than that, now it's just a case of putting her back together by taking her apart in reverse. Hopefully you still have all your screws and parts because you tucked them away safely. Check her eyelashes are actually through the sockets before you clip her in, because I did mess that up once myself. It is very exciting when she actually starts to look done whilst clicking it all back together. And before putting the screws back into the back of her head, I just want to check that she actually worked. So I do have a few little things to update you on. I did end up very lightly straightening her hair using my own straighteners. I used the lowest setting and I used a heat protectant spray, and I just worked very quickly, and to me it did just take that little bit of energy out of it, which is what I wanted. I do not think this process damaged her hair at all. I did also restyle it. She is looking very neat and swish. I did end up opening her back up one more time before putting her screws back in. The amount of clunk when her eyes were changing was concerning me slightly, and I just wanted to check that the chains weren't tangled or anything. They weren't tangled luckily, but as she was open, I made the decision to trim her T-bar. So one more interlude. So what trimming the T-bar does is it allows the eyes to roll slightly further back each time they're changed, meaning your Blythe doll will be looking slightly more up, and it gives just a more like aloof and curious expression overall. So I unscrewed it, took it out, used absolutely tiny scissors to take off the tiniest amount, maybe 2mm. Not only did this work out super cute, I think it has impacted her expression a lot, but it also means that when I change her eyes, it is much easier and it makes much less sound. The main risk of doing this would be that the eye color below becomes slightly visible, or that the eye mechanism in general starts to feel a bit loose. Just do this with caution if you do decide to trim the T-bar, but you can always buy another T-bar if you really have to. I think I can now say with confidence that this doll, in terms of her physical form, is done. So to recap, the doll cost me £36, 10 sanding sponges cost me £6 and I used 2, the Mr. Super Clear cost me £16 and I needed a £24 mask to use it, 5 eye chip pairs cost £5 and I used 2 pairs, a pack of 14 glue sticks cost £7, of which I used a fraction of 1 stick. I was obviously fortunate to be starting off from a place of owning a lot of necessary tools. I was also able to decorate the face and cords as well as give her a little something to wear without spending anything. But what I actively spent on a second-hand doll and acquiring previously unowned supplies for her face-up totaled to £94. I am going to hypothesize from this that in order to start customizing Blythe, whether it's one or en masse, one should be prepared to spend £100 for someone who is thrifty and already has arts and crafts stuff, and anywhere upwards of £150 for someone who is starting from a complete beginner's position. And whilst I would love to say that it could only get cheaper per Blythe as you go, I think the temptation to buy different mediums, specialized tools, ears, hands, glasses, headphones, travel cases, display stands would all creep up pretty quickly, and that is precisely the reason why I have not launched straight into a second doll just yet. Just to remind you, like, this is the surface level of customization. People get new bodies for their Blythes, people get detachable ears for their Blythes, they make them wigs, they change their scalp, people alter the bodies, people paint the bodies. The eye chips are so customizable. This was just a mini-me, but like, who knows what else you can do with a Blythe. She has resided back to the shelf, but now just has this like air of existence surrounding her. She feels like an in-between of like a piece of art on a wall and a pet rock. I do find myself like ritualistically closing her eyes at night and then opening them the next morning. And I do change them some days just to mix it up. I cannot wait to make her some little outfits. I just haven't really had a chance yet, and if this video does get any semblance of attention, I might film that process as well. I think I first encountered doll customization in maybe 2016, 2017, and I never ever thought I would be able to do it myself in any capacity. I also did really want to be a YouTuber between the age of like 11 and 14, so this has been a very surreal and cathartic experience in all realms. Hopefully, if you do have any intent to own or customize a Blythe doll yourself, this video has given you some encouragement or just entertainment. Either way, thank you for watching, and I really don't know how to end a video on a channel with no videos that may never have any more videos.